now we have a situation where we have a bunch of states that were apparently they're scrambling around to to reform their marijuana laws. Um, and I don't know if it's because of the new administration and the new president and maybe some of the picks that he made for to or whatever. Maybe people are afraid that he might start acting on some of the fears that people have about this Jeff Sessions guy, or maybe just not uh, staying to what he said during the campaign, which was basically like states' rights override the federal government trying to enforce marijuana laws for people that that want to do their recreational. And as far as medical marijuana, he sounded pretty much like he was for it, and he said as much. So, but anyway, we have these all these places doing it. Let's see. We have an article from The Hill talking about marijuana reforms flood state legislators. Legislators in more than a dozen states have introduced measures to loosen laws restricting access or criminalizing marijuana. A rush of legislative activity that supporters hope reflects a newfound willingness by public officials to embrace a trend towards legalization. Some states are taking early steps towards decriminalizing uh, possession of small amounts of marijuana. And the decriminalization that we're talking about is being floated in Texas, Wyoming, New York, New Hampshire, and Virginia as we speak. Several states are considering allowing marijuana for medical use. 28 states already have widespread medical marijuana schemes. And this year's legislators in Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah have introduced bills to create their own versions. Republicans in control of state legislators in most of these states are behind the push. Um, Another reason this might be happening is because maybe as the legislators are seeing marijuana being legalized in other states, not only is it like a keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, especially when you see the tax money that's being brought in Colorado and Oregon and other places that have had legalized marijuana for a while, like Washington State. Once they see that, they're like, "Oh, well, what's taking us so long? What are we doing?" So, and another one is the legislators are seeing the laws, and they see that some states have different laws, and they look at the different varieties of the laws, and as far as gaming the laws to work for them, work better for their people that might have interests, future interests in the marijuana industry. Maybe, I don't know. Mostly, it seems like the Republican efforts are just to slow things down and make it so a possibly people-driven amendment for a ballot proposal or something. Let's try to get out ahead of that. Legislators in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Delaware, New Mexico, and New Jersey will consider recently introduced measure to legalize marijuana for recreational use. So we have the recreational, and then back here, like I was talking about with the medical, legislators in Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah have introduced bills to create their own versions of these medical marijuana programs. Republicans in control of state legislators in most of those states are behind the push. And when you look at some of this legislation, it looks very similar. Like somebody's somebody has analyzed the medical marijuana programs, and they figured out what they liked about them, and they kind of did more of the same with some of these bills as they are written. So that was the medical marijuana states with legislation going on. Legislators in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Delaware, New Mexico, and New Jersey will consider recently introduced measures to legalize marijuana for recreational use. I did a video about that not too long ago, so we take Texas off that list. Well, Texas still has the bill, and it's still going to be on the floor, but are they going to talk about it? Are they going to argue it? And are they going to vote on it? I'm thinking probably not on the recreational in Texas. So New Jersey, I don't know how that got on this list, but we all know about New Jersey. All right, Chris Christie, He said as much. As long as he's around, you will not see any recreational marijuana. In fact, he even said we're not even going to do anything more than what we're doing right now, which is running one of the worst medical marijuana programs in the country. Um, Vermont, it don't look good in Vermont. The legislator there, they seem like they have legislative priorities, is what they're calling it, and legalizing recreational marijuana with the new Republican governor coming in doesn't seem like it's one of those priorities. Um, Rhode Island, again, we don't know about Rhode Island and Connecticut. Those, especially Connecticut, sounded like keeping up with the Joneses. Maybe they will. I mean, what's on the table for recreational is that no one's ever legislated recreational marijuana. So maybe somebody wants to be the first to do something. Who knows? There's little consensus just how to approach legalization. 3 different bills have been introduced in Connecticut's legislators. 2 have been introduced in New Mexico, and 3 measures to allow medical pot have been filed in Missouri. That's a little bit more of that when they see something, they want to write their own version so that they can include their friends in on it in the long scheme of things. And I think that's one of the things going on here, because you have the right wing versions and the more tightened controls, the more definitions and less, when it comes to medical marijuana, less qualifying conditions. And in fact, a lot of times just like in Florida, the low THC marijuana, and places like Wisconsin that want to allow that kind of stuff for like seizures where it has THC in it, but it's not enough to really get you super high or anything. Now that voters in a growing number of states have proven that this is a mainstream issue, many more lawmakers feel emboldened to champion marijuana reform, whereas historically this issue was often looked at as a marginalized or third rail issue, said Tom Angel, chairman of the pro-legalization group Marijuana Majority. Yeah, and I'll go a step farther and say that even if you were one of those politicians that wanted to legalize marijuana or do any kind of form of marijuana laws, you would never open your mouth about it, because your opponent, next time you try to run for re-election, would use that as the way he beat you, and it would work. Now it might not be as effective. Just because measures get introduced does not mean that they will advance. In many cases, Angel said, it is governors, Democrats and Republicans alike, who stand in the way. And Michigan, our governor stood in the way. We fulfilled our obligation and got enough signatures to get legalizing marijuana on the ballot. And because of some rule that they came up with, it's an old rule, but they didn't apply it to the kind of petition we were running until this time, and it screwed us directly. And it's not always Republicans. I might get down on right-wingers and other people might, they might do other things and talk about Republicans in a bad way because of other policy issues. But when it comes to prohibition, I've been pretty strict about it. It's the Republicans that push for more prohibition. They're the ones that push out the reefer madness by the truckload. But you'll see Democrats doing the same thing, using the same propaganda, only like watered down versions of it or whatever. But the Democrats are no better for legalizing marijuana. They're no better than Republicans when it comes to actually legalizing, putting the pen on the paper and pushing for legislation or signing legislation that legalizes marijuana or reforms marijuana laws. So tough Democrats control the Connecticut legislature. Governor Dan Malloy, Democrat, has made it clear he is no supporter of legal pot. Vermont Governor Phil Scott has not said he would veto a legalization bill, though he is far less friendly to the idea than his predecessor, Democrat Peter Shumlin. In New Mexico, Governor Susana Martinez, Republican, has called decriminalized marijuana a horrible, horrible idea. Why? Is that because you like marijuana inmates in your jails because they're obedient slaves? I don't know. Democratic legislators are considering a plan to put legal marijuana to voters by proposing an amendment to the state constitution. If New Jersey legislators advance a legalization law, they would run into an almost certain veto from Chris Christie, of course. While 14 state legislators have legalized marijuana for medical use, no state legislator has passed a measure legalizing pot for recreational. And then, now I'm going to talk about the decriminalization measures, but we had Kansas City, Missouri, who decided they wanted their own decriminalization measure, even though a decriminalization measure in Missouri that was passed in 2014 finally took effect in 2017. So the Kansas City Council on Thursday voted to include a question about reducing pot possession fines on the April ballot. The decision received 12 affirmative votes and 1 dissenting vote from Mayor Sly James. I like how they named him. Yeah, thanks for the no vote. Today's approval was procedural. The group gathered signatures on a petition, had enough to put it to the ballot. On Wednesday, the council's Public Safety Committee recommended that the full council approve the measure before it go to voters. In order to be approved for the April ballot, the decision had to be made Thursday, which is the deadline to approve the measures for an April election. And the question on the ballot will read, shall the city of Kansas City limit the authorized punishment that can be imposed in municipal court for the possession or control of 35 grams or less of marijuana to a maximum $25 fine, eliminate jail as a potential punishment for the possession or control of marijuana, and remove marijuana from the prohibition against drug paraphernalia. Pretty simple. We believe the people should not be incarcerated for small marijuana offenses. More than 1,000 people were arrested in Kansas City last year, and that is people whose lives will be affected by these arrests for the rest of their lives, said Jamie Cax, Executive Director of the Kansas City chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. The group led a petition initiative asking Kansas City voters to reduce maximum pot possession fine in municipal court from $500 to $25 for possession of 35 grams or less, as well as eliminating jail time. It's not perfect, but with situations like this, it's language that we put together, and it will accomplish our main goal, which will be keeping people out of prison for minor marijuana offenses. And then we're going to go on to the states. Texas might be moving towards statewide decriminalization. As of last week, there was a total of 5 different bills regulating marijuana possession laws filed in Austin that will be discussed by lawmakers during up-and-coming legislative session. 2 of the bills aim for statewide decriminalization, taking possession of an ounce or less from a misdemeanor to a civil penalty no different than a traffic ticket. The other bills merely aim to reduce the offense from a Class B misdemeanor to a Class C, which really isn't much of an improvement. Well, on the bright side, the inauguration of District Attorney Kim Ogg could help to push things towards approval for those 2 bills aiming to decriminalize on a statewide level. While she would be unable to simply avoid all marijuana offenses, she does intend to try to keep those arrested out of jail. I've never felt good about putting marijuana users in the same jail cells as murderers. It's just not fair. It doesn't make any sense, and our country is resoundingly against that. Currently, possession of 2 ounces of marijuana or less is a Class B misdemeanor, which results in a maximum sentence of 180 days in jail and or a $2,000 fine. While in the past many would be sent to jail along with the fine, we might be seeing more people being offered a fine in place of jail time, even if it does result in an arrest record. Marijuana decriminalization bill filed in Wyoming with strong bipartisan support. Several bipartisan lawmakers in Wyoming have sponsored a bill to decriminalize the possession of up to 3 ounces of marijuana. State Rep. Mark Baker, Republican from Rock Springs, filed House Bill 157 along with 7 fellow Republicans and 3 Democrats who have signed on as co-sponsors of the measure. So, flying in the face of me talking about Republicans, I guess you guys are right. Maybe I do go a little overboard. But like I always say, Democrats are not your friends either. In a place like Wyoming, I don't know if you really have more than 3-7 ratio with Democrats to Republicans. So that sounds like basically it's just kind of like a microcosm. The bill would reduce the penalty of possession for up to 3 ounces of marijuana in the state for a misdemeanor, which can land an offender in jail for up to a year and stiff fines up to $1,000, to a civil violation punishable only by a $200 fine. Probably get that fine down a little bit more, guys. That's still kind of high. Cannabis-infused products such as edibles would be decriminalized if they contain 500 milligrams of tetrahydrocannabinol or less. Sounds reasonable. I don't know why any of this is illegal, but anyway, previous attempts to decriminalize marijuana possession in the past have failed, but those bills were introduced by Democratic lawmakers without any bipartisan support in a Republican-dominated state legislature. That's a lot of the reasons why the Democrats never get anything accomplished, because especially when there's a majority of Republicans, it doesn't seem like they have a whole lot of fight to them. All right, the author of those bills, Representative James Byrd, Democrat from Cheyenne, is listed as a co-sponsor of the current proposal. According to NORML, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, state and local police make approximately 2,100 marijuana possession arrests each year in Wyoming, with the state ranking 6th in the nation per capita marijuana possession arrests. More than 70% of Wyoming residents support decriminalization, according to NORML. It's like that everywhere. And then we have New York. New York. Governor Andrew Cuomo says he wants to decriminalize pot. Again, this isn't the first time he's done this. The governor's recommendation to remove criminal penalties appears buried in a 383-page book containing 2017 plans distributed Wednesday evening among the state legislature. The illegal sale of marijuana cannot and will not be tolerated in New York State, but data consistently show that recreational users of marijuana pose little to no threat to public safety, the Democrat wrote on page 191 of the report. The illegal sale of marijuana cannot and will not be tolerated in New York State. Make it legal. So your medical marijuana program is garbage as it is, but now you're talking about like regular weed. Like you don't want to give someone a ticket for possessing marijuana, but you don't tell them where they're going to be able to buy it at. And now all the people selling marijuana, that's where the tickets are going to go, because now you're not going to be giving anybody tickets for possession. Anyway, that statement doesn't sound like something that somebody that's in the party that claims to be liberal would say. Now, what do you mean by won't be tolerated? Are you talking about, intolerable crimes are usually something met with big, stiff penalties, I guess he's just still a prohibitionist at heart. Anyway, Mr. Cuomo said New York State should remove the criminal penalties that too often result in over-prosecution and jailing of nonviolent individuals. And people that sell the grass are not violent either, man. Just saying. All right, people caught with small amounts of marijuana wouldn't be prosecuted under Mr. Cuomo's plan, but dealing weed would still be a criminal offense. Nearly 90% of pot violators recorded during 2016 were for possession and not sale, according to the governor's report. That's because you guys are out there just looking for every bag of weed you can find with that stop and frisk bullshit. Come on, man. And every time you have these people getting pulled over, the cop searches you, finds weed. You're gonna get a ticket every time. That's why possession is a huge, huge thing going on. This measure reflects the national trend and dramatic shift in public opinion, Mr. Cuomo wrote. Whereas other states have sought the full legalization of marijuana, this legislative change will specifically affect individual users and not reduce penalties on those who illegally supply and sell marijuana. Despite the shift, however, Mr. Cuomo's proposal will likely face opposition in the state's Republican-controlled Senate, Daily News reported. Our kids are getting eaten up by these drugs, State Senator Martin Golden, Brooklyn Republican, told the newspaper. Our kids are getting eaten up by these drugs. So what's marijuana got to do with that? And what drugs are you even talking about, man? You got to be specific these days. You got all kinds of shit out there. You got the drugs that your parents leave around the house in their little orange bottles. You got kids have access to all kinds of drugs. And kids are still doing stuff like sniffing glue and just getting high on whatever the hell gets you high. Because that's what kids do for some reason. I don't know what it is. But they're not getting eaten up by marijuana. I guarantee that. Maybe some of the ones that need medical marijuana are getting eaten up because your state has just like the worst medical marijuana program that ever existed. I say that about every state. They all do. They're all terrible. I mean, get it right. The only way to get it right is, if nothing else, you still have to let people grow their own medicine. Now, this Mr. Golden says, Mr. Cuomo just wants to go so far to the left. I don't get it. What are you talking about, you dick? Come on. How far to the left is he? He's like, don't give people tickets for little bags of weed anymore. That's not that far to the left, man. That's not even in the middle. That's kind of still... You'll find the vast majority of Republicans do not agree with the statement that's to the left. But of course, he's a retired cop who called the governor's proposal a bad idea. Of course, it's a bad idea when you tell cops they can't arrest people for marijuana. To the cops, that's the stupidest thing ever. Like, to you, you being a bully and a thug, arresting people is more important than, reality and facts. Like, the reality is marijuana is not a public fucking nuisance. It's not a public health problem. It's not an issue. It's not. It's never been an issue. And police know this better than anybody because they fucking answer domestic violence calls all the time. They go to the scene of the car wrecks all the time. And it's never marijuana, ever. It's always alcohol. Sometimes it's pills. Maybe the domestic violence, it might be something like meth or some shit, but I don't know. Mr. Cuomo has previously opposed legalizing recreational marijuana in the Empire State, but unsuccessfully tried to decriminalize possession in 2012. New Hampshire legislator, new governor poised to decriminalize marijuana. But based on the makeup of state senate legalization, advocates expect the state legislature this year to approve decriminalization, reducing possession from a criminal offense to a violation. New Hampshire has lagged behind other states in the region on marijuana policy for many years, said Matt Simon, New England political director for the Marijuana Policy Project, the group that successfully pushed for the last year's referendum to legalize pot in Maine. According to Simon, who had lobbied for legalization in New Hampshire for about a decade, it's the only state in New England that has not yet decriminalized simple possession. The House has passed decriminalization bills several times dating back to 2008. They have always been opposed by the governor, and they have always been killed in the Senate. That finally changes this year. Newly elected Republican Governor Chris Sununu, according to the Marijuana Policy Project, is clearly on record in favor of decriminalizing marijuana possession. So again, you have a Republican, and these governors are usually the ones that stop the marijuana legalization. Last March, a WMUR Granite State poll revealed a majority of state respondents support legalizing marijuana for recreational use, saying 62% of randomly selected adults support legalization of marijuana. Why don't you try for that, guys? Put some ballots on the ground. But predominant opponents continue to push back against the tide of legalization. Last fall, Robert P. Dealey, Roman Catholic bishop of the Archdiocese of Portland, Maine, cited the devastating impact felt in Colorado since the commercial sale of marijuana began in January of 2014. Here we go again. And like I always say, there's no two worse bedfellows than church and weed for some reason. And I think it's, like I said, it's because people that smoke weed don't really believe a bunch of bullshit, first of all. They like to analyze stuff that they get told by other people and check it out and see if it smells like bullshit, especially check into it deeper. And another thing about these religious people is that they notice that when people smoke marijuana, they're not really down with authority figures or even hierarchical structures. It's not that they don't, it's not that they totally resist it. they're not total anarchists here, but it's just that they question authority, especially those authority that are just, proven time and time again. Roman Catholic bishop. Now, is this one of those Roman Catholic bishops out there who, like, when one of the priests got caught molesting the children, he just kind of moved them to a different location or whatever? All right, whatever, man. Devastating impact what? They're still reading that propaganda report that the actual government of Colorado put out that kind of had a lot of negative things in it. So one of the things it had was the Rocky Mountain High intensity drug trafficking area, which is bullshit. The Mexican drug cartels have all but left Colorado, man. It was reported that marijuana-related traffic deaths increased by 62%. False. And marijuana-related hospitalization over 30%. Now that was, like I was saying before, it went from 6 to 9 or something like that, like 9 to 11. Come on. Dealey also warned that the use and abuse of marijuana by the youth of Colorado increased 20% since legalization in the state. Someone should give him an update because all that's not true. All the numbers are in, and teen use and underage use, we'll call it, is down in Colorado overall, and not just for marijuana, but for all drugs. So I don't know what he's talking about. The Diocese of Manchester is awaiting the language of bills before commenting on New Hampshire marijuana policy. Well, one of the things that it aims to do is stop people from going to jail for marijuana. Maybe that should clue you in on how good the bill is. We have Virginia. Senate Bill 1269 would reduce the penalty for possessing marijuana to a civil violation, punishable only by a fine with arrest or without arrest, jail time, or a criminal record. I like the sound of that. Now, the fine, I don't know what that's about. I guess they figure they can write a lot of tickets, they can subsidize their shitty budget. A bill has been filed with Virginia Senate that would decriminalize marijuana, reduce the penalty for possessing marijuana to a civil violation, punishable only by a fine without arrest, jail time, or criminal record. State Senator Adam Eben, Democrat from Alexandria, introduced the measure. Senate Bill 1269 last week. If passed, SB 1269 would set fines for marijuana possession at $100 for the first offense, $250 for the second, or $500 for the third or subsequent offense. Now, this is making it sound like it's a vice, like, oh, we don't want you to do this. Every time you do it again, we're going to give you more of a fine. That's kind of stupid, man. Under the current law, possession of marijuana is considered a Class 1 misdemeanor. First-time offenses face maximum 5 years up to $500 or 30 days in jail. Subsequent offenses can bring fines up to $200 or $2,500 and jail time up to a year for marijuana, man. According to the National Organization for Marijuana Reform of Marijuana Laws, marijuana possession arrests have increased 76% from 2003 to 2014, with police currently making over 22,000 marijuana possession arrests per year. They just looked at the numbers. They're like, we're not getting any money out of all these people in jail, but if we just charge them a small fine, which is not really that small, times 22,000 by 100, man, that's a lot of money. You can be pulling in a lot of money off this weed. But that's not the real way to make money off of weed. How about just let people do let grown-ass adults do what they want to do that's not hurting other people, whether you think it's safe for the individual doing it or not. That shit don't matter, really. You can drink alcohol. That's not illegal. That's definitely not safe. All right, the number of African Americans arrested for possessing marijuana in Virginia climbed from 4,991 in 2003 to 10,293 in 2014 and represents an increase of 106%, NORML says. In 2013, African Americans accounted for nearly half, 47%, of all marijuana possession arrests in Virginia, but comprised only 20% of the state's population. And these kind of disparaging numbers between people that are less in the population, it's obvious what's going on, man. Either A, you're just targeting these minority communities, especially the African Americans, which could be, but there's not enough of that. There's not enough African Americans for that to really be the reason. The reason is because when you do pull over the white kids and they do have the marijuana, you don't give them the tickets. It's that simple. Well, now that it's just going to be a fine with no criminal record, hey, white boys, get ready to get them fucking tickets because they're going to be giving them to everybody. 2015, a poll conducted by Christopher Newport University's Wason Center for Public Policy found that over 70% of Virginia voters support decriminalizing marijuana possession. Who's them 30%? The cops? The poll found that decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana had broad support found in all demographic categories, including self-identified conservatives and Republicans, 54% and 52%. So that's Virginia for you. Everybody's getting sick of getting arrested for marijuana, and the state wants to reallocate some of their efforts on marijuana into just taking your money. Well, that's it, guys. As you see people fearing this Trump situation, this Jeff Sessions guy, like, these guys are all like 70 years old or older. They're just old people, really. They're old and they're Christian, and they want everybody to not do drugs and all this stuff. And, you talk about what could Jeff Sessions do? Well, I don't know, because it's getting to the point where nobody's even listening. Because what is decriminalizing marijuana, really? That's saying that we're not really interested in giving you, making this something that you go to jail for. And in some cases, not even get a criminal record for, should be all of them. That should be all of them. And then the fine should not be a graduated system that eventually gets us back to the old system. You're just giving people more chances to get caught before you start cracking down for real. And it's disingenuous to say that, oh yeah, the public is sentiment is changing on something. Like everybody's getting lighter about how they feel about this. Well, not if you're not. If you're the government and you're not, your sentiment is not really getting lighter. You're just like, well, we have to do something like decriminalize, or these guys are going to burn the village down. Pitchforks and torches. It is pitchforks and torches, man. Our backs are against the wall, and legislators are scrambling because they see their future of prohibition. It's gone. There's no future in that. There's no future in continuing down that path. Jeff Sessions knows this. Donald Trump knows this. Every police officer out there listening knows this. It's gone. You had it and it's gone. It was all based on racism and lies. The whole fucking prohibition of all drugs. But when you're talking about marijuana, we have it, the history is in front of us. We can read the documents. We know what was said by who and when it was said. And we know that they made marijuana illegal for the industries to take over, because marijuana was about, or hemp, I should say, was about to blow up into a major industry. But to do so, it threatened other industries that were just starting to take off. Industrial chemistry. Whatever, It's over now. Prohibition is over. It's still federally illegal, and there's still a bunch of states that are not decriminalized. They don't have any marijuana reform going on at all, and it's all changing. That's changing rapidly. Now we've had this experiment in Colorado and Washington and all this. They're still there. They didn't burn to the ground. They didn't, everybody didn't turn into heroin addicts like Debbie Wasserman Schultz said they would. And now we're here.